Before the break, we showed you the latest news and numbers about COVID-19 and also discussed all the warnings that reportedly President Trump received starting way back in November with COVID. Problems with ventilators, protective gear, also well documented, including how the president has consistently shifted the blame to the governors for the shortage of this critical equipment, even saying he is not a shipping clerk. And now you can add Jared Kushner to the mix. He, the Trump son-in-law, has been tasked with making peace in the Middle East, among other things, in a very interesting portfolio. And now, reportedly, he's gotten involved in the supply chain for crucial equipment. NBC News, they've been investigating, and this is from its most recent piece on the story. Quote, Jared and his friends decided that they were going to do their thing. It cost weeks, according to a senior government official. The supply chain task force leaders pushed aside FEMA response teams that had long established methods. Instead, they first reached out to their personal contacts. The article goes on to describe how Kushner and his team are working nearly completely in the dark with little or no oversight or accountability. And now, Kushner's group is reportedly taking point in getting a testing plan in place so his father-in-law can get closer to opening the country back up. I want to bring in our next guest. Got an interesting perspective on this. Congressman Andy Kim, a Democrat from New Jersey. He also served at the Pentagon, the State Department, and the White House National Security Council, and he's on the Armed Services Committee now. Congressman, a lot to unpack here, but first off, you read the same reporting I did over the weekend where the Times broke down what they knew and when they knew it, meaning the administration about the threats of the pandemic in China towards the end of the year, and certainly heightening awareness that was made in the first and second month of this year. Yet all along, the president said there was nothing to worry about. I'm curious, because I know where you stand on this, and you've been very frustrated about the federal response in many aspects, but pull the curtain back to the cloakroom. Republicans alike here. How concerned are they by the president's response, and even the story today where we were wondering up until just an hour ago if the president was going to fire Anthony Fauci? Just how concerned are folks on Capitol Hill that this administration is not up to the task of what's asked for it with this pandemic?
Well, I appreciate you having me here. And these are the exact types of issues that I'm hearing from the American people as well. People throughout my district wondering where is the leadership in our country coming from at this point. Having worked, I worked at the White House National Security Council before. My particular expertise was on counterterrorism. And I saw a White House and an effort put into place that focused on bringing the experts up front, listening to their advice, taking that under consideration. And a lot of what we've come to learn and also what we've seen over the last couple of weeks is showing that that's not how this leadership in the White House has been working towards. That is why governors have been stepping up and filling that void. And right now here in New Jersey, we are right in the hot spot, right there in the biggest hot spot of this pandemic in the entire world. We need everything we can get, and we need all the help we can get. And these types of steps and missteps are costing lives.
I want to drill down just a second. It looks like the White House is backing off, at least for this news cycle, to fire Anthony Fauci. And moreover, they, of course, blame the media, even though the president retweeted that very sentiment. If they actually followed through firing the one person that has the highest trust rating in this country on this subject, in every poll you look at, Congressman, would even Republicans push back? I know you'd be livid if Fauci was removed, God forbid, at this moment in history. But would even Republicans stand up and say, too far, Mr. President?
I would hope that our nation recognizes that when we're faced with a national security crisis of this magnitude, that we need our experts guiding the way, showing us how we're able to do this, and making sure that that's what's driving this. And if that's not the case, whether it's Dr. Fauci or any number of other medical professionals at any level, if our experts, if our healthcare professionals are pushed out of it, we're going to lose the credibility in our response to this.
Well, let me stay on this subject, albeit in a different way. You guys approved more than $2 trillion, and there's going to be a lot more to come here in additional funding, not just for stimulus, but for relief. The president then fires the inspector general to make sure that our money, the taxpayer money, is going to the people that need it the most, and it's not going to some cronies or some people with some inside relationships with the White House. And on top of that, Congressman, we're now learning, as I just showed, that Jared Kushner, with no medical or scientific experience whatsoever, he unilaterally, after telling us it's their ventilators and not our ventilators we're in the federal stockpile, he's now making deals to decide on how to manage critical infrastructure and relief here, and he's going to be the one to figure out the national testing. Who's in charge, and how comfortable are you when you're approving this money and these expenditures that the right people are in charge of where it goes?
This was always a deep concern that I had. When I approached the CARES Act, I was really looking at it in terms of three things. One is that, are these resources going to those that are most vulnerable, both in terms of our health resources as well as with the financial resource, the small businesses and the seniors that we want to make sure we're protecting. Number two is that we need to make sure that we're using these funds of the American people wisely and that we have the accountability that we need. And three, we need to make sure that while we're dealing with the financial situation, that we're also making sure we're investing in stopping the spread of this virus on the health side. We're not going to address the financial crisis until we're able to address the health crisis. So those were the three main things that I was working through, and I'm still making sure that we're going to be pushing forward on this. Lives are at stake in my district, the personal protective equipment to our personnel. Right now, we're just trying to get more testing in our district so we know where the spread of the virus is, as we are constantly worried that we're not testing at the level that we should be. And this has been a huge problem for weeks now, and is just a massive Achilles heel in our effort to stop this virus. So I certainly see these problems playing out on the ground, and we're trying to do everything we can to be able to fix these and move forward with greater strategy as well as deliberation.
I want to stay on the subject of terminations. Captain CROZIER was fired from the USS Theodore Roosevelt, and sadly today, one of his sailors died from COVID. The way that it was handled, how Secretary Moodley not only terminated him, but then $250,000 later, it turns out here, went and addressed and demeaned him to his fellow sailors. Apparently, the Joint Chiefs was against this. The head of the Navy was against this. How did this go down, Congressman? And my question is, who's deciding these kind of decisions, because it seemed to operate in a vacuum for political expediency, not what was right for the Navy?
Absolutely. The readiness of our forces it has to be paramount. I'm on the Armed Services Committee. I'm on the vice chairman of the Readiness Subcommittee. So the decisions that are being made about whether or not to deploy our armed servicemen and women, whether or not they should be in places, put in positions where they may very well contract this virus, this needs to be our top priority when it comes to our national security right now. And when I see a decision made so recklessly, when I see it made off of what appears to be political calculations, these are not the types of ways that our armed servicemen and women deserve to be treated. And we need to make sure that we have leadership that takes their health in paramount importance. And that is something that we're trying to restore through the Armed Services Committee. We're continuing to press on this. What can we be doing to make sure we're better protecting them? And that has been a huge focus of the work over the last few days.
This maybe is a civics question, but when it came time for the states to decide if they were going to shelter in place and basically adopt a quarantine, every governor, it seemed, was on his or her own. Then when it came to getting a hold of ventilators and crucial PPE, the White House said, hey, I'm not a shipping clerk here. You guys should have gotten it yourselves. So again, the states largely had to operate on their own with late in the game some help from the feds. Now the president comes out over the weekend and says it is his and his decision alone as to when to reopen the country. Now I know there's been pushback, but just from a logical perspective, your district is right on the Pennsylvania border in New Jersey. This can't be some uncoordinated decision that all of a sudden the calendar strikes May 1 and we basically say everybody go outside when New Jersey might still be dealing with a pandemic and maybe Pennsylvania's in a different place or vice versa. Who's in charge of making that decision? Is it at the state level? Is it federal? Are you concerned that this thing's going to be coordinated or not?
This confusion that you're addressing here, it's something that I hear from people in my district every single day. They're wondering who's in charge, who should they be listening to, and the lack of clarity here is absolutely a huge problem for our country right now. Right now, we should be working together to try to break down these divisions, find a way to be able to come together as a country, to be able to speak with one voice, be able to go off of the same sheet of facts here, to be able to talk through this strategically. And that clearly isn't happening. And people in my state know that these types of mixed signals are, again, costing lives. We're just on the outskirts of the hotspot, the biggest hotspot in the world in New York City, in metro area. Now we're hearing from the White House that Philadelphia could very well be a hotspot next. Yet we're not hearing anything about increases in testing to us. We're trying to set up a third FEMA test site in South Jersey. We're not getting anywhere right now in terms of moving that forward with the type of urgency that we need. Or we're not getting the type of commitments we need on personal protective equipment. So if the White House is telling us that we are on the outskirts of a hotspot and potentially right there in the middle of the next hotspot, they're certainly not treating us with the level of urgency that we need to be able to get ahead of this. This is the problem that we had a couple weeks back. We need to learn those lessons from it and make sure we're getting ahead of this virus as best as we can to try to stop the next outbreak. So these are the types of mixed messages that are causing enormous level of confusion and really deploying resources in a mismanaged way.
Congressman Kim, I appreciate the time today. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
And up next, an ER doctor who works in New York City will join us from a report from the front lines. Governor Cuomo says we've hit a plateau, but the hospitals, they're still full, and the battle against coronavirus rages on.